this tutorial we are in the video tab over here in the editing panel on the right hand side of the screen, and in a previous tutorial we looked at video actions. In this tutorial we are continuing down this panel. We're in roughly the middle section here, and we'll be looking at cropping, reflection and drop shadow. Now you won't be able to see those very clearly right now because we have not selected anything in our timeline, so that is the first thing we want to do. So we can come down to the timeline and choose a clip that we actually want to edit in some way. So I will click on a brief recording of my dashboard. So if I click on that, we can see it selected now on the canvas, and we can see that in the editing panel it's now lit up those areas that we can actually do something with. So coming down here to cropping, that's the start of this tutorial. What we're going to do is look at how we can actually cut away parts that we don't need. Now in this particular clip that I've just clicked on, so that this lit up here on the right, I don't want to cut anything away on that because that fits my screen nicely, but I will want to put a green screen clip on top of this and crop away parts of that. So that's what we're going to look at. Now before I select that, there is a separate tutorial about green screen. There's one tutorial about actually physically setting one up and maintaining it, and there's another one about how actually to get the green screen or chroma key onto your clip. So what I've done in advance is prepared one. So here, as you can see, as I move it over, parts of it are see-through. That is, so what looks like a black sheet hanging over a pole right now is actually a green sheet. So I've turned that transparent, and what we're going to do now is cut away everything around me so that it's just me. So to do that, I'll just bring it over here, and we're going to now crop those parts away. So in the timeline we can see that we've selected that it's called the green screen and lounge. It's just an image. It's a screenshot I took of the video as it was playing, and so we've got that, and now we want to crop away parts of it so that we don't have all this extra space which we can't green screen out. Now that is just real life. That's just the back of the room where all my daughter's toys and mess was late at night. And so what we're going to do here is come over to the right hand side where we see cropping, and we're just going to, we've got left, right, top and bottom, and now we just can slide these over, and now they don't go all the way to me, which, given that we're dealing with transparency, doesn't matter at this point because we've got to the point of this being see-through. So when that room in the background disappears and all we're seeing is black right now, that's good because that black is just transparency. But if we did want to get closer to, say, my knee, then we would come back over here to the one that we just were dragging. The highest it goes to with the slider is 400, but we can just click in there and we can put in different numbers and test how much closer we can get without actually cropping out part of my body. So let's say 500 as a test, and that's good, but let's test, 600 might be too much, but let's try. Okay, that's actually all right, but then maybe if I were to move my arms around, part of them might disappear. So probably go back to 500 is probably not bad, so we can keep it there. And again, the moment we actually get onto transparency, like complete transparency behind me, there's no need to do any more cropping. But this is just to show you how the cropping actually works if you did need to crop very close to something. So say we're happy with that on the left, then let's come over to the right hand side, and then we're going to drag that in as well here on the slider. Now we can see that that doesn't reach the green screen hanging in the background. So again, with that one, let's say 500. Yep, we're happy with that. And now the top, we can slide that in, and you know, that would be fine just there because it's fully transparent. Just to show you that, if I were to move this down here, you can see now that it's fully transparent. Okay, but if we did want to actually just crop this all the way down, we'd just bring this down like that. And with this one, that happens to stop just above my head anyway, so that's fine. So that is the cropping tool, and the bottom we don't need to crop, but the same thing applies. And so that's how you would use the sliders to crop, and again you can actually use these numbers here to get closer and closer. Okay, so that's the cropping. Let me just minimize that. And then we've got the reflection tool. Now this could be good if you're dealing with images and shapes where maybe you're bringing things onto the screen and you just want to add a bit more of a dynamic kind of look to what you're doing, but it would look like this. So if I click on the reflection, just adds that bit of a reflection there, which can sort of be more subtle or be a complete mirror image below, and then you can round the corners of yourself and the reflection. Now rounded corners you would notice more if there was actually a full square in there. Of course for me right now it's not going to make a difference because we've got green screen, so I wouldn't need to use this, but you could certainly use that to round the corners. And just to show you how something can be rounded, if I now click on the background image here, let's say we actually want to round those corners, just to show you how that works. So I'm going to bring those in like that, and that's how you would round those. And then if you click in here with the numbers again and overtype them, you'll find that you can actually get it more rounded until you start getting an angle. So, you know, again, depending on what you're actually bringing in, I'm using Command Z to return the screen to the way it was. Now, these effects are good with shapes. They could be good with, you know, just bringing a bit more of a sort of dynamic look to what you're doing, make them a bit more attention grabbing. They're not going to be practical to use for everything, of course, and you don't want to distract people by just using effects for the sake of it. But if you can find ways of using these rounded corners and things that aren't distractions, then they can be quite nice. So if, for example, we were to want this image of me here, I'm just going to turn off the reflection, and say we wanted, say you didn't have a green screen, so you had a background and you just wanted to crop it and kind of get it as close to being as you know, maybe a circle if possible. Well, what we would do is come back to this. Now I'm just going to go up to my media library up here. This is what the original looks like, so let me just move that away. Let me bring in this back into the timeline. So if that's the original, then let's come in back here and do some cropping and rounding of corners to get maybe try to get that looking like a circle around me, because that can be quite a nice shape to have rather than you know, angular squares and rectangles. So first thing we can do is bring in, you know, we can round that, so that's rounded, but we really want to kind of have these edges meet to make it more like a circle. So if we come to our cropping tool, we can bring it in from the left, bring it in from the right, and that is probably about as circular as we can get there. I mean, we could, if we wanted to sort of let's see, say we want to get rid of the right a little bit more. I think we haven't got the angle that we need to get a perfect circle right now. Because if the camera were sort of closer on me, then we would have a bit more space to make that a circle. But that's the general idea of how you would get a circle, or close to. And then, you know, that could look better than perhaps just your body against the back. It depends on your preference. So that's how you would use the cropping. The reflection we looked at here, and now you can see it with this. It might look a little bit better than it did before. Definitely looks better with a background than without. You know, the reflection looks better. Okay, and then a drop shadow. Just click on that. Now, just to make this less messy, I'm going to get rid of the reflection so we can just focus on the shadow itself. Now, where the shadow can be pretty good is like now, yes, it kind of makes it stand above, you know, on top of the background more, and we can make it look like a sort of like a gentler shadow by either by clicking on that black rectangle and changing the color of the shadow, or actually just making it a bit more opaque by reducing the opacity. You can see that looks a bit better, and you can sort of blur it a little bit as well, so that's a better shadow. But shadows look much better if we come to the example now of the green screen, where I'm going to just move this down, move that away, and move this back. Okay, so now if we want to give a shadow on this, the shadow will look pretty good with this compared with the way we were just looking at it. So come over here, drop shadow. Now that's a bit strong. One way to think of shadows is if you have, you know, lighting, which you probably should have to some extent, then if the light, for example, were to be a bit more from, you know, coming from this angle, then that shadow makes sense. You can change the angle of the shadow. Okay, and then let's make it maybe about there, so we don't want to make it be too distant. Okay, there. Make it a bit more see-through. There, and then blur that a little bit. And then it's so subtle, but actually it makes it look almost more 3D, that you're just sort of, you know, you cast a gentle shadow against the background, and that looks much better. Okay, so that's how you would deal with the shadow. Alright, so we've looked at cropping to get rid of space that we don't want around an image. We have looked at giving that image a reflection and rounding the corners. And we have looked at a drop shadow and how to give us a realistic sort of shadow against whatever is on the canvas as our backdrop. That's it for this tutorial. I'll see you in another one.